Good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us. The show is Diaspora Dispatches. I get to bring you the latest news from across the continent of Africa. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you're tuned in and watching us from this afternoon, 3 p.m. here in Nairobi, East African time. We start our bulletin from the United Nations, where South Sudan, Equatorial Guinea, and Gabon are in arrears on paying dues to the United Nations operating budget and are among the 6 nations that have lost their voting rights in the 193-member General Assembly, the UN chief said in a letter circulated on January the 19th. Also losing voting rights are Dominica, Venezuela, and Lebanon, Secretary General Antonio Guterres said. Gabon is having a 2-year term on the Security Council, though its voting rights there are not affected. The UN Charter states that members whose arrears equal or exceed the amount of their contributions for the preceding 2 full years lose their voting rights, but is also gives the General Assembly the authority to decide that the failure to pay is due to conditions beyond the control of the members, and in that case, a country can continue to vote. The General Assembly decided that the 3 African countries on the list of nations in arrears, Comoros, Sao Tome and Principe, and Somalia, would be able to keep their voting rights. It granted the 3 countries the same exemption last year. According to the Secretary General's letter, the minimum payments needed to restore voting rights for Venezuela is $76 million, $243,941, and for Lebanon, it's about $1 million, $835,303. And for Equatorial Guinea, it's about 619,103. And South Sudan debt for the United Nations stands at $196,130 and Gabon, $61,863 and Dominican Republic owes the UN $20,000, $580. And then we move on to Cameroon, where Canada now says that it will host talks with a view of achieving a comprehensive, peaceful and political resolution of the separatist conflict that has plagued the English-speaking west of Cameroon for 6 years now. Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Melanie Joly, announced a peace process aimed at resolving an ongoing war in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon. It is the latest bid to resolve the war in Cameroon. On a statement on Friday, January 20th, the minister said some warring parties had agreed on forming technical committees to begin work on confidence-building measures. The parties involved are the Republic of Cameroon, the Amazonian Governing Council, and the Amazonian Defense Force, the African People's Liberation Movement, and the Southern Cameroon's Defense Force, the interim government, and the Amazonian Coalition Team. Melanie Joy said Canada accepted the mandate to facilitate this process as part of their commitment to promote peace and security and advance support for democracy and human rights. Since 2017, the Cameroonian forces fight secessionist militants, and both sides have been accused of atrocities in the fighting, which, according to the International Crisis Group, has killed over 6,000 people. In Morocco, lawmakers on Monday voted unanimously to review ties with the European Parliament, accusing it of meddling after a resolution that urged the kingdom to respect press freedom. Members of both houses of Morocco's parliament met in the capital Rabat for a joint session in response to the non-binding European text adopted on Thursday last week. In a statement after their session, the Moroccan legislators called the European resolution an unacceptable attack against the sovereignty, dignity and independence of judicial institutions in the Kingdom of Morocco. They said it had seriously harmed the fundamental trust between them. As a result, Morocco's parliament had decided to reconsider its relations with the European Parliament and submit them for an overall evaluation. That is what the Speaker of the House of Representatives said without giving further details. Under a 1996 agreement, Morocco and the European Union have been linked in a tight economic and commercial relations, particularly in agriculture and fishing. European lawmakers in Strasbourg had urged Morocco to respect the freedom of expression and media freedom and to guarantee imprisoned journalists a fair trial. The Reporters Without Borders watchdog welcomed the EU Parliament vote as a break with 25 years of passivity. Some lawmakers say Morocco's former colonial power, France, was the one who was pushing the European Parliament to take that measure. Okay. So we head over to South Africa, where Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was welcomed by his South African counterpart for talks in Pretoria. On Monday, a continental powerhouse, South Africa, has resisted Western pressure to condemn Russia and defended its neutral stance on the conflict in Ukraine. Pandor told a briefing ahead of the meeting that the talks would help strengthen the already good relations between the two countries. Sitting alongside Lavrov, she described Russia as a valued partner. South Africa recently assumed the chairmanship of the BRICS, a grouping that also includes Brazil, Russia, India and China, to challenge the dominant US and European-led global governance structures. We go to South Sudan, and ahead of the visit of Pope Francis, the Vatican Technical Advance Team have been welcomed in Juba. In South Sudan, they are there to assess the preparation for the papal visit, which will take place from February 3rd to the 5th. Stephen Ameyu Martin Mula, Metropolitan Archbishop of Juba, on Tuesday said almost 90% of the work that is supposed to be done ahead of the visit have been completed. But Van Megan, Apostolic Nuncio to Kenya and South Sudan, explained the purpose of the visit to the media. And then we head over to Burkina Faso, and the country has confirmed that it wants 400 French troops stationed there to leave within a month. Government spokesperson Jean-Emmanuel Ouedraogo said the country, which is battling jihadist extremism, wanted to defend itself. Now, French President Emmanuel Macron had asked the authorities to clarify their position after state media reported on Saturday that Burkina Faso was ending an agreement signed between the two countries in 2018. The report said the Burkinabe authorities still wanted support from France in the form of equipment. Mr. Macron had said there was great confusion over the reported comments. Last year, French troops pulled out of neighboring Mali after falling out with the military leaders of the country. France also ended its 8-year anti-jihadist operation in the Sahel known as Operation Burkina. France has kept close military ties with many of its former colonies in West Africa and has been helping several of them fight Islamist militants who were active in that region. And the latest from the Democratic Republic of Congo, a suspected rebel attack in the eastern of the DRC has killed at least 20 people. Local officials said fighters from the Allied Democratic Forces raided a village overnight. They killed people in a bar before looting several homes and shops and setting them on fire. The attack was in the Beni area of North Kivu province. The ADF rebels, who are allied to the Islamic State group, have killed hundreds of people in assaults and bombings in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The Ugandan and Congolese armies have been fighting rebel groups in a joint offensive in the region where there has been militia violence for decades. And then we go to Ethiopia, and the head of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Abune Matthias, has called on all bishops around the world to urgently convene in the capital Addis Ababa as the church faces a major split. This comes after a group of 3 bishops announced the formation of a separate church decision-making body. They appointed more than 20 new bishops to replace those working in Ethiopia's Oromia region and some parts of southern Ethiopia. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church forms Ethiopia's largest religious group with tens of millions of followers. A previous division in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which lasted for nearly 3 decades, was only resolved in 2018. That time, the split was with church members in the US. This time, it comes from within Ethiopia itself. One of the breakaway bishops, Abune Sawiros, said they made the move to save those followers of the church who were led by clergy that was not diverse or inclusive and who did not understand their language. The Patriarch called the bishops' actions illegal, and other bishops have denounced it as a conspiracy to divide believers on the basis of ethnicity. Okay, so we head over to the visit of the U.S. Treasury Secretary to Africa. And Janet Yellen is visiting South Africa on the latest stage of a three-nation Africa tour aimed at boosting U.S. influence. The tour, which also included Senegal and Zambia, comes as Washington faces growing competition in the region from countries like Russia and China. South Africa has recently taken over the chair of the BRICS economic group, made up of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which was set up as a counterweight to U.S. global dominance. While in South Africa, Ms. Yellen is expected to push President Cyril Ramaphosa to pursue plans for a gradual transition away from heavy reliance on coal to cleaner energy. And then we head over to Rwanda. A high court in Rwanda has sentenced a former youth and culture minister to 5 years in prison over corruption charges, extending a previous sentence by a year. The regional sentence, which came last year against Edward Pamporiki, was a rare case of a top official convicted of corruption in the country. He was suspended from the cabinet last May and put under house arrest while being investigated for corruption and misuse of power. He remained under house arrest until his ruling. Pamporiki confessed to the charges on Twitter and asked President Paul Kagame for forgiveness, but in September, a court sentenced him to 4 years, which he appealed. On Monday, a High Court judge in the capital, Kigali, said justice needs to be served to set an example. The 39-year-old poet and filmmaker was previously a vigorous supporter of President Kagame and the ruling party and rose rapidly through the ranks. His lawyer, Evode Kayitana, told the media that he had not decided whether he will launch an appeal. And the latest from Sudan is armed men opened fire on a bus station in southern Sudan on Monday. Officials have confirmed killing at least 4 people and prompting authorities to declare a month-long state of emergency. Officials in South Kordofan province say the attack in the province capital of Kadugli wounded at least 4 people. No group immediately claimed responsibility for the attack, which took place as the victims were heading to areas controlled by a rebel group known as the Sudan People's Liberation Movement North, local media has reported. Musa Guber Mahmoud, South Kordofan's acting provincial governor, called the attack unfortunate and pledging that local authorities will spare no efforts to regain security and stability in the province. He said a state emergency took effect on Monday across the southern province in the border with South Sudan. And a fresh fighting has erupted in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo despite an agreement between government and rebel groups to end hostilities. The fighting between the army and M23 rebels on Tuesday is said to have caused many people to flee their homes, and that is according to the local reports that we are receiving from the DRC. The military has not commented on the latest fighting, but a spokesman for the rebels accused government forces of attacking their positions as they prepared to further withdraw as outlined in an agreement reached in Angola's capital, Luanda. Last week in Davos, Switzerland, President Felix Tshisekedi said the rebel group was not withdrawing but moving around and redeploying to other areas. The rebels have accused President Tshisekedi of being more keen on destroying the M23 instead of peacefully resolving the conflict. The UN says more than 400,000 people have fled their homes in the conflict since last year. And that is the latest news from across the continent of Africa. So much to talk about this afternoon, but I'll just pick a few of these stories, and maybe we start with that one from Democratic Republic of Congo. We thought there had been a couple of conflicting reports whether the rebels had actually moved or not, but last week, and we talked about it here, President Tshisekedi, while he was in Davos, there attending the World Economic Forum, he said the M23 are still very much present in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they have not moved. Instead, they keep just going in circles and finding other new areas just around within the areas that they're supposed to be moving from and redeploying. That's what he said, redeploying in other areas, but they did not really move, so they're still very much present in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but also M23. And I think this is very interesting, the ensuing counter accusations and accusations between the government of the DRC and the rebel groups, because the M23 have been consistent in the manner in which they've been accusing the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and every time the government of President Felix Tshisekedi comes out and makes up a statement, there's been a counter rebuttal by M23 leadership and calling out President Tshisekedi, and a lot of times disputing some of these statements that he's making. So last week, after he talked and after he said, these people are still here and they're just redeploying themselves in other areas, but they're not really getting out of this place as was agreed during that mediation process that took place in Luanda in Angola. M23 also rebutted and said, President Tshisekedi is not keen on really finding peace. And today, after that attack, you can see they're out here saying that President Tshisekedi is just keen on destroying the M23. I mean, what would you expect President Tshisekedi to do? Not keen on destroying M23? You are a rebel group and you're causing trouble in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Of course, he's keen on destroying the M23. And I know you have your issues that you are using a means of coercion and these attacks so that the DRC could pay attention and come to a negotiating table with you, something that the government has said it will not do. But there has been some reports before that the army of the Democratic Republic of Congo, M23, and MONUSCO, they've had a meeting, and other bodies under the United Nations and the East African Community Force as well, met some times back, but it was very down low. It was not a meeting that was made public like that. So we learned about it days later after it had happened, and we don't know the content of that meeting. It has not been made public. So because of all these things and in the manner of some of these things are done in a very clandestine way, it's very difficult to know exactly what is the progress as far as this mediation is concerned. What did they talk about? What was the agreement that was agreed upon when these different actors met during that secretive meeting? It was said they met, the government of DRC did not talk about it, they did not confirm or deny. Obviously, if somebody does not confirm or deny, sometimes the immediate assumption is that probably the thing happened. So the assumption is, because it was confirmed with different parties to that meeting, that it had happened. And we don't know what the meeting was about, and we don't know what some of the resolutions that were made, if at all they were in harmony with some of the resolutions and some of the efforts that have already been made as far as trying to solve this conflict in the DRC is concerned. We know there is a mediation process ongoing led by former President of Kenya, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and also with other stakeholders. And I think the rebels had flown in Nairobi a few days ago, and they met with President Uhuru Kenyatta, and former President Uhuru Kenyatta gave out a statement about the commitment of this M23. So now this morning, fresh fighting has broke out in that part, and people have started gathering their things and moving and running away. I don't know if there are any casualties that have been reported yet. It's still not clear, because that just broke out this morning, and the military has not commented on the latest fighting. So we have said here before, and I'll keep repeating, attention has been given so much on M23 and their role in this conflict, which cannot be really disputed, and what they're doing in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the amount of suffering that they have caused, and everything else that we see play out. But nobody is questioning the role the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo is playing in fueling this conflict. So what M23 is telling us now, after this conflict, after this war broke out, is that the military, the fighting between the army and the M23 rebels, Tuesday said to have been caused by, I think, the the M23 is accusing the DRC army of attacking them in their position. First of all, M23, why are you still in those positions? You're supposed to have moved out of that place. That was the agreement. And so the army of the DRC is not relenting. So both sides are not holding to the agreement that they signed to. Both sides are violating this agreement. So this keeps taking these mediators to the drawing board. And so this poses another problem, and this poses another challenge. So it is this statement by M23 that, I find to be very interesting. And they're saying that President Tshisekedi is really not keen on finding a solution, but he's just keen on destroying M23 instead of peacefully resolving the conflict. So that is what they're saying President Tshisekedi is keen on doing. His aim is just to destroy M23 instead of peacefully resolving the conflict. But how do you expect President Tshisekedi to peacefully resolve this conflict when you were occupying the territory of his country in a manner that is not in conformment, with the law? So he has every right to try to protect the integrity of the sovereignty of the boundaries within and the Democratic Republic of Congo. He has the mandate as the president, but also this conflict is very unique in its nature because we've been trying to look at the different facets and the different issues and the different factors that really have played out in fueling this conflict, and so it's very delicate. So perhaps sometimes just applying the law as it should might not be a possibility now. So now they have to use the different avenues of trying to finding a solution, and that has included the mediation processes that we've seen, has included the negotiations that we've seen, has included the good offices that they are, the UN and other bodies have created to try and find this solution, has included different things that have been tried. But what is unfortunate is sometimes you feel like they're making a lot of progress, and the place seems to be a bit calm, and before you know it, one side has perhaps done something that has triggered the other side, and now you keep having these fresh attacks. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, it is the people who get to suffer so much, and so people are fleeing from their homes. That is the latest report. People have been fleeing from their homes since morning today to try and find other safe areas. So I hope that MINUSCO, that is the United Nations mission in the DRC, is really up there trying to protect these poor civilians who they get caught in these crossfires between the government forces and these rebels, the M23 rebels. And so I don't know, these statements by the M23 that President Tshisekedi is only keen on destroying M23 and he's not really interested in finding a peaceful resolution to this conflict. I think that is quite telling. But, M23 should not be the one to be issuing these statements. What moral grounds are they standing on to accusing President Tshisekedi of, not wanting to find a peaceful resolution to this conflict? What are you doing there? What are you holding in your hands? They are guns. They are weapons. And who is supplying these weapons? M23. So I think this is a very delicate matter, and the mediators must therefore just go back quickly to the mediation and just find out what is happening. Former President Uhuru Kenyatta, you have so much work cut for you there, and I'm sure you've already reached out and perhaps you know what is happening. I know you're supposed to be traveling to the DRC this month and next month and check on how the agreements that were signed, the mediations that happened in Kenya around November, December, yeah. And you're supposed to be going there now to just see the progress of that. Well, I'm here to report to you that maybe the progress is not working out very well because of how now this new report that we are receiving, that a new war has just broke out this morning. And before that, there was an attack. There was an attack. And this time it was by the Allied Democratic Forces, which is a militant group, an Islamic militant group that has come from Uganda, that also has been really on an offensive there in the DRC. And this time they had an attack, and local officials said the fighters from the Allied Democratic Forces raided a village overnight, and they killed people in a bar before looting several homes, and at least 20 people have been reported dead. The ADF rebels, who are allied to the Islamic State group, have killed hundreds of people in assaults and bombings in the Democratic Republic of Congo. They come from Uganda, but Uganda has really beefed up its security. So every now and then they've carried out a few attacks in Kampala and other areas in Uganda. But I think because of the security apparatus, which are quite tight in Uganda, even as far as the surveillance is concerned, so their activities there could not be very successful. So I think they moved out to that soft target, and that is the DRC. Now the people there, if they're not being killed by this rebel fighting, they are now being killed by a terrorist group. Well, even this M23 and these other rebels, they are terrorists. If an action is done towards intentionally harming civilians, you are a terrorist group. So it's quite unfortunate, and you wonder when can the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo just catch a break. I think it's just bad there what is happening. Okay, so now let's go on to Ethiopia, this church politics. The church used to be the place where you would go to just have your spiritual nourishment, and it was a very neutral place, and the voice of the church was respected. But now the church, all these different denominations are really becoming very political, and in the manner in which they decide to take up issues and to raise their voices on certain matters, I think it is increasingly becoming very political. That is worrying. Now, the head of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Abune Matthias, has called on all bishops around the world to urgently convene in capital Addis Ababa as the church faces a major split. This comes after a group of 3 bishops announced the formation of a separate church decision-making body. They appointed more than 20 new bishops to replace those working in Ethiopia's Oromia region. So this is not only taking a very political undertone, but very ethnical. Why would you only want to replace those who are working in the Oromia region? We already know that the conflict that happened that just stopped last November between the Tigray and the government of Ethiopia, the Tigray, the TPLF and the government of Ethiopia. The aspects of it was deeply rooted in ethnicity. That was the biggest undertone there. So the church that is supposed to be addressing these things and to be making all members feel as though they belong together, despite of their ethnicity backgrounds, is now one that is seen to be operating under ethnicity. And so the Ethiopian Orthodox Church forms Ethiopia's largest religious group with tens of millions of followers. A previous division in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which lasted for nearly 3 decades, was only resolved in 2018. So they've had this part before. The first split was with church members in the US. This time it comes from within Ethiopia. And one of the breakaway bishops, Abune Sawiro, said they made the move to save those followers of the church who were led by clergy that was not diverse or inclusive. When did the church stop being inclusive? They feel like this pastor or this clergy from these areas, they're excluding the members who were not from the majority ethnical backgrounds of these areas. So that is quite something there, isn't it? Yeah, so they're saying this clergy are not diverse or inclusive and did not understand to the members who do not understand their language, the patriarch called the bishop's action illegal, and other bishops have denounced it as a conspiracy. I think this must have something to do with what has been happening in Ethiopia. So it's quite something. So now the story of Burkina Faso, having told the French troops that have been stationed in that country to leave within a month. All right, so it has been confirmed to be true. Burkina Faso has confirmed to be true. Remember, there were rumors that it had expelled France's ambassador, and then France could not really confirm this, and Burkina Faso, a very high official government member, they are confirmed indeed that was the directive from the Burkina Faso government. There has been problems, and I will not get into the details of these problems between Burkina Faso and its former colonial master, and they have fallen out. I really expected this to happen because we know the contentious issue now is the presence of the Russian mercenaries in the country that has really put a wedge between France and the army junta who took over after the coup that they did in Burkina Faso. So Christian Kabore, I don't know what has become of him. That was the president that was removed, I believe. I don't know what has become of him. They had put him under house arrest. I guess he's still under house arrest, and nothing much is really happening there. And so they have, they've asked for this person to be removed. They've asked the French troops to be removed, for them to leave where they had been stationed. Remember, these French troops had come through an agreement that France had with these countries in the Sahel region. That they had formed, French had formed this G5 to help in the fight against the extremist groups in these West African states, and Burkina Faso was one of them. So that's why there are French troops there. And, they're following the same script as Mali, like I've said here before. So Mali already did all these things. So Burkina Faso is just following into the footsteps of Mali. So I'm really not surprised. I think I was expecting that. So let's see. But what I found to be interesting is what the government spokesperson said, Jean-Emmanuel Ouedraogo. He said that the country, which is battling jihadist extremism, wanted to defend itself. How can you defend yourself? You can't defend yourself. You really can't defend yourself, because why did you remove President Christian Kabore? Why? It is because you said he failed to take care of the issue of security. Since you removed him, it has become worse. And the reason why you're having the Russian mercenaries, which now has been prescribed as a terrorist group, the US did that 2 days ago, I believe, is because you want them to help you with the issue of insecurity. But the Wagner group, these Russian mercenaries, have gone ahead, and now I think other Russian companies are also coming in the country, and they're taking over the major mining areas, sites in Burkina Faso. And you're out here saying you can protect yourself. Burkina Faso, you have proved that you can protect yourself. And that is why you have been working with the Russian mercenaries in the hope that they will help you in beefing up your security. And how has that worked out for you, right? So it's interesting, and you say you can defend yourself. Well, let's see how that will work out for your country. Now so the Moroccan lawmakers yesterday voted unanimously to review ties with the European Parliament. This Morocco is such a country here in the continent. They've never been decided whether they are Africans or whether they belong in another place, and they just found themselves in this continent by mistake. In fact, at some point they even wanted to build a bridge. Was it King Hassan the First or the Second who wanted to build a bridge that will connect Morocco to Europe, because they truly believe they belong in the European Union. That's where they belong. So because of that, I think Morocco had signed an agreement in 1996, and under the 1996 agreement, Morocco and the European Union have been linked in tight economic and commercial relations, particularly in agriculture and fishing. So they've had this great relationship, with the European Union. And so there is a journalist who was arrested, and because of that, in the European Parliament, they talked about it, and I think they called on the Moroccan government to respect, human rights and freedom of media and freedom of expression, and to guarantee imprisoned journalists a fair trial. And because of that, Morocco did not like, and it felt as if it was being undermined as a sovereign country. It's very interesting when, especially African countries, the moments we choose to throw in the word sovereignty. Morocco, you really want to be part of European Union so badly. But one of the key things that you will see as a recurring theme in the European Union and the European countries there is the respect of fundamental freedoms, freedom of expression, freedom of the media, basic human rights, under basic human rights, okay? So if you can't have that, if your government cannot even agree to be criticized, and the media cannot operate in a space where it's free, and you are criticized by your partners, your from the European Union Parliament, these are people you've been working with and you have been associating with, and because of that, they assume that perhaps you should be on the same level of understanding as far as these rights and obligations are concerned. But apparently you're not. So once they called you out over what, some of these abuses, now you're coming out, and the Moroccan legislators met on Monday. They said, you know what, we'll review our relationship with the European Parliament because we are a sovereign country, and this attack is unacceptable against our sovereignty, our dignity as Moroccans, and independence of judicial institutions in the kingdom. It is the Kingdom of Morocco. So they said it has seriously harmed the fundamental trust between them. But the fundamental trust between you and the European Union or the European Parliament, I think, is based on some standard agreement on certain things that bounds you together, and that's why you've been having this cooperation. So if they feel what you're doing is not in line with their belief and value system, as they normally do, they will call you out. So you have to choose. Do you want to work with the European Parliament? Do you want to have this tight and cooperation that you've been having? Then you have to agree, because they're the ones who normally set these terms. And if this is a problem for you, Morocco, then I think you have every right to leave. To sever these working relations every now and then, like you've done with the African Union. One moment you're in African Union, the next you've left. But we know that your issue with African Union usually stems from the position that African Union has taken on the Western Sahara or Zahawari. And the African Union position on that matter is that the people of Zahawari or Western Sahara has every right to self-determine, and so they should be allowed to do that. And because of that, Morocco has been having a very shaky relationship with the African Union. That's why one moment, I think for right now, it is in the African Union. But if you keep pushing that matter, Morocco leaves African Union. So that has been a very dicey relationship. So it normally feels it fits very well. So Morocco, psychologically, they feel they don't even belong to this continent anyway. So they've always wanted to be part of the European Union. This is an identity crisis right here. But now the people that they feel they belong with or to, or you can't uphold some of the values these European countries do. So where do you belong, Morocco? What is your problem? All right, so one last story before we wrap up the show this afternoon. Canada has agreed to host some mediation process between the warring factions in Cameroon. I think by now you are familiar with the conflict that has been ongoing now for years between the government of Paul Biya. I hear there's another video that is making rounds on social media that is really painting President Paul Biya in bad, really terrible light. I've not seen it, and I don't think I will. I don't know what it is about, but people have been talking about it so much. But anyway, so Canada has agreed, and Canada's Prime Minister of Foreign Affairs, Melanie Joly, has announced a peace process aimed at resolving the ongoing war in northwest and southwest regions. These are the Anglophone regions, and they have been calling for secession to move out of the Cameroon and form their own country called as Ambazonia. Now, there are parties that will be present in this mediation, and that is, of course, the Republic of Cameroon, and then the other party will be the Ambazonian Governing Council, and then the Ambazonian Defense Force, the African Liberation Movement, and the Southern Cameroon's Defense Force, and the interim government and the Ambazonian coalition team. So they're saying they're trying to promote a peace and security process to advance and support democracy and human rights. I don't know if they're coming there with an understanding that the Anglophones have already decided that there's nothing else they want but to secede from the to secede from the larger Cameroon, because they feel like they're being treated as second-class citizens in Cameroon. They feel like even the developmental agenda is not really spread evenly. When you look at parts of the Franco part of Cameroon, the French-speaking Cameroon, they're saying there is an imbalance even how developmental projects are spread out compared to the Anglophone region. So that has been a major problem. And also they just, based on the history, many years ago, they feel like during the colonial time and after the colonialists left and the agreements that were entered at that time, so it's been an ongoing conflict. But of course, the government of Paul Biya, the second longest serving head of state in Africa, has not been keen to listen and to perhaps grant them some of these things that they've been wanting from the government of Cameroon. So I shall be following very keenly this mediation process led by Canada. Canada is just one of those countries that really minds their business. You hardly hear them, being mentioned in issues and across the world. So I think it is a very neutral party, I want to believe, and perhaps the intentions are genuine and they don't have any stakes in this, because they've seen other parties come, but they've always had these stakes in it, and because they're doing it because there's something out there for them to benefit after this process, or in between this process. But for Canada, I think it's a very neutral party. So I'm hopeful over what this will bear. So I don't know if the Anglophones will be willing to secede their position that they have upheld for a very long time of wanting to secede, or they'll have a working relationship and they will accept some of those concessions from the government of Cameroon. You remember, the government of Cameroon has been trying to make some adjustments over some of these issues that have been raised, especially in regards to bilingualism, and say, French and English should be used in all government offices and in all schools and all that, just to ensure some unity. But this problem goes beyond, it's not just a language problem, it goes beyond. And so they have to look at all these issues. So this is a story that we've been having for the longest time now. So obviously, I have some interest just following and seeing how this mediation process will be going on there. I don't know if they'll be happening in Canada. I think that will be a good place. That will be a good place. It's a neutral place, or maybe they will be happening in Cameroon. I think that will be left to be seen. But this is a process that I'm interested to see how if Canada will be able to find some resolution in this conflict that has now been ongoing and that has costed a lot of human suffering, has made a lot of schools in the Anglophone region be closed down, the insecurity has increased, the rape cases have gone up, things have been terrible, and of course both sides have been accused of committing these atrocities, and perhaps by the end of this we find some accountability. Yeah, I think it's important. All right. I want to thank you so much for your time this afternoon. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. My name is Miriam Ogutu. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye for now.